Hey guys, Pete here with Pete's How To's and Reviews. Today I'm going to show you how to replace a sink bowl. This is in my bathroom. It happened to crack because my wife mistakenly dropped a glass soap dispenser in the sink. There's a crack. As you can see, it went through. You can see the water seeping through and it's leaking underneath. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how to change it. It's not a fun job, or it's not an easy job, or a quick job sometimes. Hopefully you have the right tools. So those right there are brackets that would hold the undermount sink. If you don't have an undermount sink, then you don't have to worry about that. So we need to go ahead and remove the stopper. Otherwise we won't be able to remove the sink. So get yourself a wrench and remove the lock nut. The lock nut is going to hold the washer, the gasket, and some other components if they're attached, but normally it's a washer and gasket. Once you get it loose, you could go ahead and finish loosening it up by hand and just kind of bring it all the way down. The next thing you need to do is remove the pivot nut so you can remove the pivot rod. That's what actually allows you to engage your stopper. Now when you pull it out, you're going to find some nasty stuff. If you don't, that's awesome, but I got a daughter and a wife, but they don't use the same sink, so there's all my daughters here and here, and it's pretty nasty. Just go ahead and get something, clean it up, and hopefully you have the stomach to do it. Now you have to remove the slip nut so you could remove the tailpiece mount, whatever they call it. Once you get it loose enough, you could go ahead and try to drop that rubber gasket. It's a little difficult to do. Either way, it's got to come off. So you could do it now, or you could do it once you take the tailpiece out. At this point, I'm trying to grab it and dry it as I'm going because my hands are slipping. But once you get a little bit of space, you can actually grab it with a wrench and hold it in place and spin off the tailpiece. Once the tailpiece is off, that allows you the opportunity to remove the slip nut, the washer, and the gasket. That frees up the drain from the top. Now you just stick your finger in there, it pulls up. It's really nasty. What I end up doing here, guys, just put that in a bucket, go ahead and clean everything up. This is how it looks when it's all disconnected. Now you go ahead and get some pliers and loosen up those wing nuts. They're going to be really tight. If you could do them by hand, that's great, but normally they're kind of tight. So just go ahead and loosen them up all around. Now we're back up top. Go ahead and stick a blade to go through the caulk. The reason for this is because I have an idea, and I'm going to show you here. I didn't end up really using this idea because I didn't have fishing line or guitar string or any type of wire like that. But if you do have that, this would be probably the easiest way for you to remove your sink if it's undermount for sure. And I'm just showing you an example with the floss. You wrap it around a knife or whatever, and then you go ahead and push it through the hole. Once it's pushed through the hole, that allows you to see the string poke through the other side. So there it is. And then you could either grab it with your fingers, since it's floss is a little difficult to do, or you could grab it with some pliers or whatever. Needle nose pliers you could use, whatever you have. Once you pull it out with the pliers and you could grab it with your fingers, at that point you could go ahead and kind of do a saw motion all the way around the sink. Since I didn't have fishing line or guitar string, I had to do it the more difficult way and try to cut the caulk as much as I could and then try to push the sink out. Well, that was more difficult. I didn't show that part because it was it wasn't too fun, but I ended up having to break the sink up and take it out piece by piece. Once that's out, get a blade and scrape off as much of the residual caulk as possible, and then you'll have to clean it with some alcohol. This here is some silicone caulk that we're going to be using. You can get whatever brand you want. Just get something that seems to have pretty good list of things it does. It won't shrink or crack or last quite a while, or it doesn't take forever to dry. I have an old caulk gun, but this is a cheap one. You could get this for a couple bucks at a hardware store. Get a piece of wood that is wide enough to go across the sink opening. Get yourself a clamp that has a removable top. Get a spray bottle with a soapy water solution, some alcohol, and some rags or paper towels. First thing we want to do is we want to clean underneath the countertop to get rid of as much residual caulk or whatever that is there. So go ahead and rub that until it's nice and clean. Next, loosen up the top screw. Most clamps that are designed this way do have an option to remove that head. So you just unscrew it, it comes off, and I'll show you what you're going to do next. Then you go ahead and loosen that clamp and slide it all the way down. Make sure there's enough rod for it to stick through the sink drain opening. Get a blade, a nice clean blade if you have one, and cut the tip of that caulk. I normally cut at an angle. There are little lines on there you can follow, so just cut at an angle. Depends on how you like to use caulk. You might want a more steep angle or not. It's really up to you on how you like to cut that tip. Some caulks do have a little layer that you got to poke through with a rod, so make sure you're poking through that. In some cases you might want to make the hole bigger bigger so you have a wider bead of caulk as well. So for instance, the sink install to have a wider bead of caulk is, I would say, a better option. But what I did here is I basically went around the whole top of that sink bowl and did parallel lines. And then I did globs of caulk, hoping it kind of acts kind of like a suction cup once it's inserted. There's no scientific method to this, but I would assume this works best in my mind. Get your 2x4 and put it across the sink. I did put some napkins there. I don't want to damage anything, which it shouldn't damage the stone, but I did that anyways. Position your rod or your clamp and insert that rod in the sink drain. Obviously there won't be no pipes attached to that yet. Once you have that in position and you have it up, at that point you are going to have to hold it with one hand, and then you want to install the end piece of that clamp. Once the clamp end piece is in and it's tightened down, at that point you could start tightening up the clamp and raising the sink bowl to mount to the countertop. Check the space or the gap underneath to make sure it's about even. You can use your fingers or a tape measure. I'm checking my fingers first, and then once I tighten it up a little bit more, then I go ahead and check it with a tape measure. Clean up any excess caulk as soon as you could. Keep in mind this is silicone, so it's not going to clean as easy with water. Install the clamp, so you just slide that back in place. Not all countertops are designed this way with the slit that currently has. Some countertops, they drill a hole and fill it with epoxy and a screw and mount to that. So this is a different design, so don't expect to see exactly what this specific countertop has. This one is nice because it slides in and you could adjust it that way. And when you put them all in, you put them in position and start tightening them down so they're pretty snug, but just not extra tight, because you want to be able to adjust the sink bowl if you need to. But once you know everything is in position, for instance, I kind of checked with my fingers, you could tighten them down. So that's what I ended up doing. I did tighten them down, and if I needed to adjust anything, I could have went back and adjusted it, but it seemed to be in the right position. Now I'm taking a tape measure and just kind of checking the measurement of the overhang, making sure they're looking right. And I felt like I needed to shift it a little bit, so I pushed on it a little bit. And once again, I'm using my finger. Sometimes the finger seems to work good. You put a little indent on your finger when you're pushing up in that section, and you can kind of get a good idea on the overhang. But the tape measure is a more accurate way. Go ahead and release that clamp. When you drop it down, obviously you got to reverse what you did. So you got to remove that head again and pull that clamp out. Clean up any excess caulk that you have, and then go ahead and add caulk and seal the gap up. Now I do highly recommend you getting a smaller tube of caulk. Normally you don't use them with a caulk gun. You have to squeeze it with your hands or with your fingers, and it's more maneuverable in these tight situations, because in this case I kind of had to work the caulk a little bit more with my finger to try to get it where I want it, and it was more cleanup. But if you get a tube of caulk smaller, you could squeeze it with your hands. It's gonna go in the spot you want it to and be less manipulation, unless you have a special attachment for the caulk gun. As you can see, I went ahead and used the bottle with the soapy water, and that helps your finger glide quite easily. So what I do is I sprayed the whole thing and I ran my finger, and then I would spray my finger and go back and forth with it until I had it nice and smooth. And this is the final shot of the sink installed. The drain and everything else, just go ahead and reinstall everything. Just reverse what you did. Like I said, I do recommend cleaning all those parts inside and out, scrub them, unless you want to buy new parts to replace. When I was done with everything looked pretty good. The stopper looked nice and clean. I cleaned it really well. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe.